When I reviewed the 2017 Hyundai Elantra Sport last year, I came back pleasantly surprised. Although the car was a little rough around the edges in terms of its interior refinement and ride quality, I had a lot of fun driving that car. And today I have this, the GT model. And in my opinion, it's a car that's wrapped in a better looking body and it has a much more practical hatchback design, but it features the same 1.6 litre turbocharged 4-cylinder engine as that Sport. It has the same manual gearbox and the same multi-link suspension system. So the question is this car just as good as that sedan, or is it even better? That answer is coming up here on the Drive Guide. This Elantra GT Sport follows the same mentality as the Elantra Sport sedan did, where this is kind of riding a new middle ground, a segue to what will become the Hyundai N division. We have just seen the 2019 Veloster N at the Detroit Auto Show, and that will be the first product that will come to North America. Hyundai, if you're watching, I desperately want to drive that new N product. I think it looks the absolute business. Again, here we have a 1.6 litre 4-cylinder engine. It's turbocharged, it puts the power to the front wheels. Here we have it as a 6-speed manual. You can get a 7-speed dual clutch as well, and if you option for that, you do get some very nice paddle shifters. And then we feature that same multi-link suspension system, which is unique to the Sport models. Now, what's the most interesting thing about actually driving this car is that there are some very strong similarities to the sedan, but then some very strong differences as well. On the highway, as we're going 110 right now, the biggest thing I can tell you is this GT rides so much better than what the sedan did. The sedan was very stiff, borderline on harsh, especially when you're in town going over, some pretty uneven pavement. But this is so much better that if you were calling the odds on just ride quality, the hatchback would win every single time. Other similarities to the sedan are the gearbox. The clutch, as I stated in that review, is weighted perfectly. Same here. The throws on the gearbox are a little long. In the Sport model, you kind of get everything you'd ever want. You've got an 8-inch touchscreen, you've got blind spot warning, you've got this amazing sunroof just above me. You have, look at this, red seat belts. How cool is that? And wireless phone charging, cruise control, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, heated seats, a heated steering wheel. If you wanted to spend more money and go up to the ultimate, which if you do, you have to have the 7-speed dual clutch. But for me personally, the things that the Ultimate offers, which is ventilated seats, a bigger screen in the instrument cluster, a few other safety features like automatic emergency braking, lane keep assist, adaptive cruise control, I don't really need any of that. And I personally prefer the 3-pedal living, so this Sport packs everything I could really want out of a car. The interior is largely different as well. The touchscreen is poking out rather embedded. The touchscreen in this Hyundai is pretty much foolproof. There's nothing in here that strikes me as difficult. But saying that, if you would like to see a more in-depth review of this system, let me know by hitting that like button. The interior refinement was one of the negatives I had towards the Elantra sedan. I thought there was just a few too many hard plastics, and at highway speed it was fairly noisy. But here in the GT, there are a few more soft touch plastics, like where they really matter. You can still search for some harder plastics too, but these little red accents littered around the dashboard and the red seat belts and red stitching, that it gives a little more character to this cabin, a little more vibrancy, and it makes it a nicer place to sit in. One area that this GT beats that sedan outrageously is the ride quality. That sedan was very stiff, occasionally on the sides of harsh when you were going over very rough pavement at low speeds. But the ride quality in this is so much better. It's still on the firm side, but nowhere near as difficult as what that sedan was. So that really covers everything I want to say here on the highway. Let's now go into town and talk a little further about what this car is like to live with on a day-to-day basis. The difference in ride quality in town is just night and day compared to the sedan. Another thing with that car, along with this one as well, is that there isn't a sport mode. There isn't a way to change the suspension or the throttle response. It's just out of the bag, that's how it is. And this one seems a lot more balanced overall for day-to-day living. With it being a hatchback, of course, there's a lot more practicality. You've got a few more places to store things up front. This armrest can slide forwards and backwards. Another great thing with the hatchback is that when you fold those rear seats down, you can have almost a flat floor. You can actually move the floor downwards slightly to give yourself a little more space. Rear seat comfort is a lot better than what it was in the sedan, but for someone that's 6'4" like me, I would still struggle to sit behind someone my height. But at least in this car, I can sit almost upright. In the Elantra GT, I had to crink my neck backwards to try and sit behind myself. It strikes me that living with the GT on a day-to-day basis is so much easier than what it is with the sedan. But saying that, one of the things that made that Elantra so special was the surprise that it gave me when driving in the twisties. So let's go hit them now. So now we're in the twisties. One thing I can really reveal to you is that when it comes to throwing yourself into a corner, this car still wants to play. It still wants to get involved with the magic of driving. This engine does sound a lot different to the sedan as well. Again, it has the same 1.6 litre engine that has 201 horsepower and 195 pound-feet of torque. But that engine felt really fizzy. And this doesn't. It's nearly there. I would maybe use the word perky to describe it, but what I remember from that sedan is that it was crazy, it was visceral at every rev. But this, like I said, when you drop a few gears and you get to 3 grand, after that, it just becomes a little bland. It doesn't do much more for me after that point. It's a race to 3 grand with this thing when you're just driving along normally. Let's say, right, so we're kind of cruising in 4th gear. I put my foot down, turbo comes in, it races to 3 grand, but then it sort of plateaus. When the engine has its turbo spinning at full capacity, the magic kind of disappears. That fun factor of the turbo surging you forward, that sensation that you would get out of, let's say, when you're on a jet plane, is the most exciting thing about this engine. But it disappears when you hit 3 grand. That's one real shame of it, I think. But driving along, again, you are going to find it very, very easy to downshift, hit that 3 grand again, and go from the beginning. This car isn't as fun to drive as that sedan, and I do think it's due to the fact that I'm not hearing all that much engine noise. From the outside, when you start up this thing, it has a nice little rumble to it. I'm noticing as well that there seems to be a little more roll in the corners than the sedan. Not too much so, but I really remember how flat that sedan would corner. I don't know, this is rather interesting. For a car that shares all the same mechanical components, you'd imagine them to drive exactly the same. But maybe that Elantra sedan is a brilliant argument that a car is so much more than the sum of its parts. After throwing this car into the twisties, it is evident that it is still a driver's machine, but it doesn't contain every last piece of DNA like that sedan did for fun to drive factor. And this is why I'm left at a bit of conundrum with this car. If I was gifted the money to go to a Hyundai dealership and I was forced to buy either this or the sedan, I would have a really hard time choosing between the two. On one hand, one is better looking, has a much more practical design, and it is much nicer to drive on a day-to-day basis. But the sedan was just so much better to drive hard that if I went and bought this car, I would be spending all of my time thinking about that sedan. And if I bought that sedan, I'd be spending all of my time thinking about this hatchback. So I want to hear from you. Which car would you buy if you had the money to do so? Let me know in the comments down below, and I hope to see you again on the Drive Guide.